I thought I was going to be able to talk to you from the relative safety of the table. They keep pushing us from that table over here, now up here to the speaker, to the podium. I'm Debbie Harris, and I have to make a correction. On the speaker biographies, it says I have a master's in journalism from the U of M. Must have come off LinkedIn where it says I attended the U of M. That's okay. It's okay because I finished everything but my thesis. But my master's is a Master's of Science in Health Sciences. And I'm working on a Master of Arts in Narrative Medicine right now. And I'm going to give you a little bit about my history just so that you know from what perspective I'm speaking and why I'm even here. So tomorrow, our youngest son, we have 3 boys, and our youngest son, Joshua, will be 21 years old. He was born prematurely, and he had a grade 4 brain hemorrhage at birth. So when he was born, there were a lot of assumptions made about our family and what we could or could not handle as far as raising a child with a disability and also raising other boys in the family with that child. So we were told, after a lot of discussion had occurred about whether or not they wanted to continue to treat him, that when we took him home, that he would only live for 2 months. And so then they said, never mind, we take that back, he'll only live for 2 weeks. So he'll be 21 tomorrow. And thank you. And I say that because we had a support system that helped us. I'm a immediate past president of the Art Greater Twin Cities, and I think at the time when Josh was born, it was Art Hennepin Carver. And there was a program they had, a siblings workshop, where we could bring our boys and they could get together with other kids their age and talk about having a sibling with a disability, engage in activities, and kind of make them feel more like their world is more typical than it really was and still is not. In any case, I say that to say that a lot of our kids, and our son Josh has very complex medical needs. He's technology dependent. He has a trach, he has a feeding tube, he's on oxygen. He needs 24-hour nursing care. And so when you look at Josh, you know he has a disability, and you know what his barriers are going to be. Some unexpected and some not so unexpected. And I think the first barrier was that the medical community would not accept him as worthy of treatment based upon his potential or perceived lack of potential. So that was our first fight, and I think that was our first, the first aspect of advocacy that we engaged in. And so now, since I've been kind of volunteering in this kind of disability arena for 19 years, I quit my job after 2 years to stay home to take care of Josh, and started volunteering with the ARC and other organizations since then. There are a lot of our children and our children of color who a couple of things happen with. First of all, they might be pushed at receiving labels of disability when that is not the case. And secondly, those who do have disabilities that might have an impact on their potential employment or how their education is approached, who aren't getting those diagnoses early enough, who aren't getting supports early enough, and aren't getting the advocacy that they need. So that's why I'm here, to kind of be a voice, not for just my son, but for a lot of those children who are coming up behind him. And as we see, that whole kind of, the incident of disability is increasing. So when we look at the demographics that are shifting for people with typical needs, take all of that into consideration when you're looking at people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And think about the barriers that they have in addition to everything that you're seeing here. A long time ago, I think it was Essence. I don't know if it was Essence or Ebony. I think it was Ebony magazine, and they used to have an essay that's written by a reader at the back of the magazine for each issue. And this one was really particularly significant to me because it was called The Brother in the Wheelchair. So it was a man, African American young man, who was talking about how all of the struggles that he has just being African American in this country and being male, but then all of the supports that we typically have in our own communities, where we often are readily accepted, he was left behind in his own community as well, in his church, in his social circles, in his family, because of how people viewed him. And so my message here is more so, I think we need to raise the question about how we value disability. When you look at the numbers of how many workers will be needed, how many workers are available, those are typical workers without any compromises at all. So when you have a student or a young person who wants a job but maybe is on the Asperger's spectrum, maybe has autism, maybe has an intellectual disability that affects speech or whatever, how do we receive those people? And how do we approach them? Maybe they have a problem with making social connections. So when I think about those demographics, I put all of that on top of what our kids are facing as well. And so I guess that's the message that I want to leave. We need to ask the question about how we value disability in all of our communities. At ARC, we have a number of outreach programs for communities of color. It's a huge issue because I wonder how many families of color are able to access the resources they need in healthcare. If you don't start there, if you're not healthy, you can't do anything else. And so when you talk about issues of education, of employment, of housing, if you're not healthy, if you don't have someone who values it enough or encourages your family enough, like we were encouraged to support you, then you're not going to even get to those places. And then once you get through those places, even if they're ideal, how is the community accepting you as a person with a disability? So that's my message today. I think Kim Keprius, our CEO, and Georgianne can talk more about specifically the programs that ARC provides. But I think I really want to leave that general message that, the incidence of disability, it's increasing. And so we don't want to have another whole marginalized, kind of invisible spectrum of the population that is just essentially and almost inevitably being left behind. That's it.